What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, continuing my deep dive into Bruce Springsteen's studio catalog. Got the 3 albums from the 90s today. I'm going to rank these from 3 to 1. Then I'm going to incorporate that list with the 70s and the 80s. I still have blepharitis, which is why I have the sunglasses and this weird light on. It's red. Sometimes it waters. Not pleasant to look at. I would like to dedicate this video, as I would probably like to dedicate this entire Bruce series, to a friend of mine, Eric. Went to school with him at Cal. He was a huge Bruce Springsteen fan. I'm pretty sure the day these albums dropped, I went over to his house, listened to them both. I listened to one on headphones while he listened to the other. We compared notes. One of them's longer than the other. Oh, 2 of these, Human Touch and Lucky Town, they came out on the same day. So when those came out, I went to his house, just as I did when Guns N' Roses' Use Your Illusion came out. We kind of listened to those together, just as I did when the new U2 album came out. There was a U2 album around this era. He was a hardcore U2 fan. I went over to his place and we listened to it together. So a shout out to you, Eric, if you're still out there, if you're watching this. Great memories, but he was a huge, huge, huge Bruce Springsteen fan. So even though I don't have much positive to say about those 2 albums we listened to, I'm dedicating this to you anyways. Nothing but positive things about you, buddy. But anyways, all right, yeah, let's get on to the 90s. Number 3 is... Number 3 is Human Touch, one of 2 albums Bruce Springsteen dropped on March 27th, 1992, the other being Lucky Town. This is the longer of the 2 by about 20 minutes. That's probably why it's here. Like, I can't say it's a bad album. I just don't find it interesting at all. It is kind of a Tunnel of Love Part 2, but it doesn't have, like... Tunnel of Love came at a time when I think Springsteen had to do Tunnel of Love. I mean, he had these series of albums through the 70s and 80s that were just like increasingly better. And though I don't like The River, most people do like The River. So he was on a hot streak. And Tunnel of Love was that sort of necessary, I'm just going to play small ball, happy with some singles, don't need a grand slam home run. And I'm not saying the expectations were lower, but like just... it had that comfortable vibe. Then he takes 5 years off. I think it was 5 years between this and Tunnel of Love. And this is just, it's underwhelming. Like the analogy that made the most sense to me is like if you go to like an amusement park, maybe there's like 4 roller coasters. And like your friend's like, okay, I've been to this amusement park, man. I know these roller coasters. This one, like you have to go on that. I don't care if the line's like 2 hours long, wait. And there's 2 other roller coasters. Like, those are really good. Maybe not worth like 2-hour lines, but even if it's like 45 minutes or so, wait, those are good. That 4th roller coaster, the Human Touch roller coaster, I mean, it's not bad, but if there's a line, maybe skip it. But a lot of times there's not a line because it's just not that good. But if the line's more than like 20 minutes, I would just skip it. It's kind of the way I feel about this album. It has a little bit of a 90s glossy production that's just a little too full and like saturated, it seems like a little too produced. It like the songs wash over you and they're not offensive. You got a nice generic rocker, a nice generic Bruce style ballad, much in the line of like things you might hear on Born in the USA, but without memorable hooks, without lyrics that like absolutely compel me to like want to pay attention to the lyrics. I just don't think there's anything on here that is really that interesting. And I remember before this album came out, Bruce was on Saturday Night Live and he played 57 channels and nothing on. And I just remember it seemed outdated at the time, right? I mean, definitely outdated now, but that's not his fault. I mean, 57 channels if you don't have cable. I mean, now there's, hundreds, thousands of channels. But it was just so underwhelming despite this kind of attitude and this, like, he was trying to, that's not Bruce. 57 channels and nothing on is not a Bruce song. And there's just so much of this that just sounds like mid-tempo adult rock. Someone like Jeff Tweedy of Wilco knows how to do adult rock. This is not what Springsteen is about. This album it leaves me empty. It's like close to an hour long. There's really only one song in here that I think is actually, like, if I were to make a playlist, one song I would pull off here, that's Gloria's Eyes. Almost reminds me of like an early 80s Greg Kihn song with like this cool like rock riff, some more blustery Bruce vocals. if this was on a stronger album, I think it would like help just lift up the overall, like it would work well among stronger songs. But really, everything else on here, the sequencing on here, um, it's just it's just like average Bruce. Like I feel like this is Bruce not as a guy who's inspired to sing about certain things, but a guy who is now whose job is now to be a musician, and he's got an image and people expect a certain thing from him, and he's trying to feed that image in a way. But he also has Tunnel of Love under his belt now, so he can play that image a little bit and get away with it. But I just, yeah, man. One really bad song. There is one song on here that I think is bad. It's called Real Man. Really bad synths. I think that's kind of a bad song. Also, there's another song. Um, Maybe it's on the next album. Oh, Man's Job. Like there's some little outdated macho-ness on here that I don't know where it's coming from. Like it isn't in line with I think the Bruce image of like what a man is from past albums. So it's those are kind of weird. Like Loving You is a Man's Job. I thought I would love to hear Prince's version of Loving You is a Man's Job because that's a fascinating listen. Springsteen's take on whatever Loving You is a Man's Job is, I just don't think is that interesting. So I think it's just a really disappointing album. I just don't think it's that interesting, and it goes on for like an hour. But that's my number three, Human Touch. Number two is Lucky Town, the album that came out on the exact same day as Human Touch. This was supposed to be, I think, the more rock of the two, but that's very slightly more true. Though there are two tracks on here which I actually think are pretty good. This album is about 20 minutes shorter than the other one, far less tracks than the other one. But there are two songs. One is called The Big Muddy, which has this like slower, kind of moodier, almost slinkier, slightly swampy vibe. There's like some acoustic slide in there that just adds the perfect amount of atmosphere. Pretty good song. And then there's another song called Souls of the Departed, which also flirts with like a swampier type vibe, some electric slide action in there. Like both the songs that have prominent slide are standouts, some harmonica in there. It's just got a much slinkier kind of attitude that I think, I don't know, both of these just really work. Like Human Touch can be one album. Let's do an album of this like swampier, slinkier, slide guitar infested stuff. Because I think those are two pretty good songs. Other than that, these are a bunch of okay rockers, some mid-tempo ballads, some mid-tempo rock. Your typical Book of Dreams is your typical sort of acoustic Bruce ballad. Yeah, it's just nothing really stands out other than those two songs. Though I do think maybe it just works better because it's shorter. And, by the time I get to the 40-minute mark, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's still another 20 minutes of this. At least I get to the 40-minute mark. I've had two really solid listens. And again, this isn't bad. In fact, this might even be one of those roller coasters where like, okay, man, if it's like a half hour, like some of the parts of this roller coaster are boring, but there are two fantastic drops that make the whole thing worthwhile. Yeah, that's only maybe 20 seconds out of the minute and a half ride, but it's a good 20 seconds. So maybe that's how I would rank this. It's slightly more enjoyable. Back in the day, on probably what I think is the night of March 27th, that was my exact opinion. I do remember listening to these both. I remember I listened to Human Touch first and he listened to Lucky Town. We were on headphones in his room just chilling, and he was done early. And I was like, oh man, I still got like 6 more songs. Sorry, buddy. And then we switched and I got finished. I was like, yeah, that was a much better album. And I haven't changed my tune over the decades. So anyways, yeah, that's number 2, Lucky Town. And my number 1 for the 90s is 1995's The Ghost of Tom Joad. I think you could call this Nebraska 2 and Nebraska 2, not TOO. 2. And I don't even think Springsteen would get mad at that. I think that would be a compliment. This is your very acoustic, bare bones, a lot of just Bruce and a voice and a guitar, a harmonica. There is a couple songs that have more of a band vibe, but the band is not hard rocking in any way, shape, or form. They're maybe just adding some very subtle support, such as on the opening Ghost of Tom Joad. Very character-driven songs like Nebraska, a lot of Depression era type stuff, as the title would suggest. We do get like references. There is one song that references like the Civil War, and then we get World War II, and then we get Nam. We get songs about like Vietnamese refugees coming over here and their conflict with Americans, and kind of stories about pretty much Americans learning to accept people literally just because we realize I may have these preconceived notions, but once I get to know people, a lot of immigration issues going over the border, specifically the Rio Bravo down here in Texas. And in a lot of ways, this also reminds me, as Nebraska does, of Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, which, if you have not read, a powerful, powerful book, essentially about a young black man in the United States who the cards are against him from the beginning. He does commit some crimes, and he's very much guilty of those crimes. It isn't a case of mistaken identity, but the book so powerfully was like, but what choice did this individual have living in this system, living in this society? And that's what these songs are doing. These songs are getting to the heart of like, just the heart of like so many problems we have, especially in this country, and how there's human beings who are just trying to survive and make it at the core of these problems. Like, lyrically, it's a pretty powerful album. I do think musically it doesn't quite have the variance of a Nebraska. It doesn't quite have that immediacy of Nebraska. Nebraska is just lightning in a bottle. Springsteen literally sits down with a guitar and knocks out a perfect album. This one feels maybe a little more crafted. Like, I've done this before, I got to be a little more careful. But at the same time, hats off to Bruce. Not overcrafted in any way, shape, or form. Like, he keeps things pretty stark and pretty basic. It just, there's a little bit of something that Nebraska has. A little bit of like spark that this is just lacking a little bit. And I think had there been something a little more bouncing, like an Atlantic City, that type of energy, or an open all night, is that the name of the song? Yeah. This could maybe lift up a little more. As it is, it's a really compelling listen. I think it's a great, this is one of I usually listen to this driving back from Austin late at night when I'm in the mood to just like listen to lyrics and get lost in a story. But yeah, some really good stuff on here. The opening track is fantastic. The Ghost of Tom Joad. The second song, Straight Time, is absolutely fantastic. Just about how living in jail, how hard it is to get out of jail and then live in straight time, especially when you're not being supported when you're out and you still have these troubles. And it might just be easier to grab that gun and commit a crime than it is to try to make it go straight. Highway 29, about a guy who meets a woman, robs a bank, and flees for the border. Youngstown, which is huge live, a awesome live song. It doesn't quite get that huge performance here, but it's about a single town and its sort of trajectory through history, especially as it relates to like what it did for wars and what the people who fought those wars get to experience when they come back to this town that supported the wars and now they're not being supported. A lot of really complex issues that Springsteen is balancing here. Sinaloa Cowboys, Tale of Immigrants and Tragedy Among Friends. The Line, about a guy who works for Border Control, so we're getting that angle. The melody of The Line, pretty sure that's the same melody as Love Mine is Zero, Bob Dylan song. It's definitely there. I think if there's a little more pep in it, it would be even a little more obvious. Balboa Park, down in San Diego, about smugglers, pretty much about life in San Diego, living in this very, very, very vibrant, diverse border town. Dry Lightning, more of a love song. The only thing on the horizon is Dry Lightning, is the love is lost. The New Timer, somebody who's riding the rails. This is very much a Great Depression era song. His buddy eventually like gets lost. Cross the Border, about crossing the Rio, hoping for like having hope. You know, this country is supposed to provide hope, and this is from the viewpoint of somebody who sees something across the border that could possibly make his life worth living. Galveston Bay, this is the one about Vietnam refugees coming over after the war. I grew up in Orange County. My whole life, I mean, we had a huge Vietnam refugee community there, and it was an amazing place to grow up because we had so much absolute amazing food. And as a kid, I don't know if there were racial tensions. I didn't experience them. Like, half my class was Vietnamese growing up in elementary school. So to me, it was very much that was just life, and it made sense. I did not know why they were there because our country had invaded their country. This is a really good look at that lyrically. And then My Best Was Never Good Enough. He goes through a bunch of cliches and just kind of dispenses with them. Lyrically fantastic. I think the music is lacking slightly, but I think clearly, this is the best album of the 90s. My number one, The Ghost of Tom Joad. All right, that is what the 90s albums look like, the ones I just discussed. Incorporating this list into the entire list, that's what it looks like. I do have The Ghost of Tom Joad below Tunnel of Love. Tunnel of Love is one of those that literally every time I listen to it, I think I love it a little bit more. And that there's a little more, again, it's down to the music. I like the commitment to this sparse acoustic vibe on The Ghost of Tom Joad. I just don't think it is as successful as Nebraska. And I think Tunnel of Love is one of those that is just has some absolute charming numbers on it. But clearly Lucky Town and Human Touch are at the bottom. Like I would love to be one of those people who would rank it higher. I like enjoying music, and I wish I loved everything because that means I could listen to anything and have a good time. But I will never listen to those albums again. I might pull a song out for a playlist, but those are, now that I've gone through this one more time, I'm done with Springsteen. I probably will not revisit those albums anytime soon. I will revisit The River there at number 9 because one of these days I'm going to learn to love it. I know it. I know it. But anyways, that's it for the 90s. Super excited for the 2000s. Things get much better. There is one album in that decade I absolutely love. It's gonna jump up that list a bit. So I'm super excited about that. But anyways, that's all I got for now. Appreciate your watching. Let me know your thoughts on these albums. Let me know how to find the end to Lucky Town and Human Touch. If you can give me that so I can learn to love them. But anyways, thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, share, comment, and peace. Talk to you later.